Okay, so hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of AI and Oats, which is my daily show where I answer some AI questions and comment on some AI news. But firstly, if you're new, welcome. My name's Alistair, this is my YouTube channel where I teach Claude Code and Codex for knowledge work, and I also run an AI consulting and training business that could help your business work out where AI actually would be useful to grow your revenue. And if you're interested in getting in touch about that, there is a link in the description. And I also have a school community where I go into more detail about the actual skills and setups I use within Claude Code and Codex. And again, there's a link for that in the description. But let's get into the questions now that the preliminaries are out of the way. So, first one, how do you use Claude Code / Codex at work for your enterprise? I guess probably not the best person to discuss this because it's not like I really work. I'm not running like an enterprise company, and although I am currently doing an internship that does involve me using Codex a little bit at a bank, and but I would say that that's more just it's not like Codex is kind of the done thing. I'm just like one of the very few people who actually uses Codex, so it's not like there's properly sorted kind of GitHub repos and anything like that. In that instance, I just have Codex connected to Microsoft SharePoint and like Microsoft Teams and that sort of thing. Scaling like a kind of usage of coding agents within business, especially for knowledge work as well, is something that actually I was discussing just yesterday with someone. And I mean, I think the best solution is that you're going to have to start switching a lot of stuff to GitHub if you don't use that already in your enterprise, which, I mean, obviously if you're coding you probably do, but if you're doing knowledge work, I still think it makes sense kind of to start switching stuff to GitHub and have like a shared repo where you have like actual deliverables and kind of pipeline items. But as I say, I haven't it's not something with which I have much experience myself, like in terms of using it, but I likely will soon be having to set up that kind of shared GitHub repo for my own business for ducks. So that's the approach I'm going to take, is to have a shared kind of GitHub repo, and then where the kind of actual deliverables and client work goes, so that any collaborators can like push and pull to that. But I mean, I have to say, coming from a non-coding background, I'm not an absolute expert at GitHub, but I do think that kind of knowledge workers are going to have to start learning how to use GitHub as well soon, even if they're not coders by trade. So yeah, not the most useful answer to that question necessarily, but hopefully there was a little bit of insight there. So next question, should I build custom agents? Well, I guess that's a little bit tricky, because what do you mean by custom agents? If what you mean is kind of custom sub-agents in something like Claude Code, my initial response is no. Opt more towards like skills. You don't need to create a specific sub-agent just to do the skill, in my opinion. It certainly used to be the case that when I was first getting into Claude Code, I thought it was quite fun to make a lot of sub-agents, and I would have pipelines of kind of different sub-agents doing different things. But then I realized that just ran into issues, because really those should have just been skills, and by making them different sub-agents, they were then starting with a fresh context window every time and didn't understand fully what the previous agents in the pipeline had done. So within Claude Code, I would say I don't feel like people make custom sub-agents that much anymore. It's much more skills-based. In terms of like setting up, like should you set up like loads of different Hermes agents for different things, I would say maybe not. That would be my inclination. The one area I think maybe it is worth exploring, setting up a range of different sub-agents with kind of different tool access, different file access, that sort of stuff, might be something like Anthropic managed agents or Claude managed agents, if you want to set up a team of those, especially if you're almost kind of doing more agents as a service, so where you'd be managing agents for different businesses and that sort of thing. But quite frankly, I think as an individual, you don't really need those. You can just sort of substitute them for things like routines. And now if you want to consider a routine a sub-agent because it's kind of like sorry, not a sub-agent, a custom agent. I mean, this is the issue. What counts as a custom agent? I don't know, because the definition of agent is somewhat nebulous. In the sense that people apply it in lots of different ways. So if I have a routine that handles one thing repeatedly and has its own like workflow that it uses for that and its MCPs that it knows to use for that, does that become a custom agent? And if so, if you do consider that a custom agent, then yes, you should build those. However, in my opinion, those aren't really custom agents, and I think you are better off setting up Claude Code or Codex, or potentially Hermes agent, but I start with Claude Code or Codex, as essentially highly skilled, capable, like generalist team members who can handle lots of tasks. So it's another team member who has the skills. You build a skill, you build the capabilities for various things like video editing, like front-end design, like market research, like email copywriting. And you do that using skills and a good filing structure so that it has all the necessary context about you, your aims, your business. But I wouldn't make lots of different custom agents and like say, okay, now I have to go talk specifically to the website copywriting agent that understands how to write in my voice. Rather, I would just have within my whole kind of, filing system for my business, I would have something like voice guidelines and probably a skill that is attached to that whenever it's writing kind of publicly facing copy, like on a website, that would know to reference that document. And equally, maybe in the agents.md or claude.md, I'd have something that points towards that document, kind of tags that document to say this is where you need to look for examples of how to write, and therefore it is able to write better websites. It is able to write better website copy that sounds more human and adheres to the principles I like, understands the context about the business, but it wasn't necessary to create an individual agent that is specialized in copywriting and has in its own kind of sandboxed environment all the knowledge about the business, create it as part of the generalist capabilities of Claude Code and Codex, who become extremely capable team members, if you want to think about it that way. That's the approach I would take instead of building a whole bunch of custom agents, because before you know it, you won't be able to remember which agents are which, and they'll probably be outdated before you even realize it. Whereas using something like skills, you're able to keep them up to date more dynamically. Telling Sol in Codex that I want to speak to the manager, I want you, not your agents, to go through everything. I mean, I guess the argument here is that if you allow Sol to delegate too much, it gets done to a lower quality. I don't think that's entirely true. I think there's more nuance to it than that, because I think the important thing is that you make sure that an intelligent model like Sol, or if you're doing it in Claude Code, Fable or Opus, is involved at the kind of planning and orchestration layer, and ultimately the final check layer as well, I would argue. But I think if you have a good plan in place, definitely, like if you have definitely made a good plan that is clear, and you have Sol kind of orchestrating it and checking stuff roughly as you go along, then you can use cheaper sub-agents both for execution and cheaper sub-agents for review. I guess it's true that they don't always catch everything all the time, but that's when you can start, having like a more intelligent model like Sol review at the end. So I still think it makes sense from kind of a token economics perspective, not to have Sol do everything, but have it involved at the kind of top level of planning and orchestration, and then I guess ultimately kind of signing off before handing it back to you. So I don't think but if you try to use Sol to do everything, I mean, yes, it will be done to a high quality, but you're going to spend more tokens than necessary, in my opinion, because Terra and Luna are still capable of doing a lot of the execution, I think, and it's just a thing to be aware of, that you should still have an intelligent model check it at some point towards the end. Claude versus Claude Code in 2026, what's the actual difference? I mean, the main difference is Claude Code can work directly in your like folders and that sort of thing, or it can work in the cloud in a GitHub repo as well, and it can actually read and write and use your computer, use terminal commands, that sort of thing. So it has computer use, all of those sorts of things, browser automation as well. So it's basically like a fully functional kind of person at a computer almost, in terms of anything a person can do on a computer, pretty much Claude Code can do that, whereas normal Claude can't do that, as far as I'm aware. Even if Claude can make kind of HTML artifacts for you and that sort of thing, it's not saving them into your files directly locally on your computer, or you can't just say to it, go get this file from here. You'd have to paste the file in. I mean, as far as I'm aware, I mean, I barely use Claude, just plain Claude, anymore. I'm almost always in Claude Code. And I know that the way I've just described it, you might say, oh, well, Cowork can do all of that stuff as well. Yeah, I mean, arguably, yes, but I've made this point before that I see no point in using Cowork because it's just essentially Claude Code with a better interface and maybe a few more guardrails and therefore slightly less capability. And the interface for Claude Code in the desktop app is now, in my opinion, pretty much as good as Cowork, so I see no reason to use Cowork. But yeah, that would be the difference between Claude and Claude Code, is that Claude Code actually can work locally in your files and use your computer. And I mean, Claude Code, yeah, I think Claude, yeah, I mean, like I say, I don't really use just Claude in chat mode much at all, but yeah, I do think it can do stuff like have sub-agents and it probably can do still quite long-running tasks like Claude Code could. What it's probably not going to have is things like goal commands or loop commands, so I guess you can't really build kind of workflows in the same way. But yeah, no, I mean, basically just my advice to anyone interested in AI currently, like regardless of what field you work in or in what capacity you're trying to use AI, is go straight to the coding agents, because like Codex, Claude Code, or if you feel you must do something a little bit kind of, I don't know, watered down, then Claude Cowork or ChatGPT work, even though it's basically the same as Codex. I mean, when those things that are fully agentic and can actually work locally on your computer and use computers and do browser automation, that is where AI, first of all, just feels super fun and amazing, and also starts to bring a lot of actual returns in terms of kind of getting you more productivity and greater output. And I'd say, like, nowadays, don't even really bother starting in the chat if you're still like, or don't bother continuing in the chat really. If you're still using the chat, just jump straight to the coding agents. They're quite accessible now, much more so than when you had to run them in a terminal in the past. And obviously I know you can still run Claude Code in the terminal, but quite frankly, using it in the desktop app feels very easy. Would you switch your business to AI calling right now? I mean, I guess this is a reference to AI voice agents, which, I mean, you can get AI voice agents either for inbound or outbound. So I guess inbound is probably the more obvious one. Vappy, I think, is the main company that comes to mind that does voice agents for me, but I think there's more out there. I don't know, it's a difficult, I mean, I think probably the sweet spot is a mixture of human and AI. I mean, what I would recommend to a business is that if there are going to be kind of calls coming in out of hours that they know they will not respond to, and they will therefore lose that business because, you know, they're just not going to take it in the kind of queries or anything like that, or speed to lead is just too slow by the time they actually get around to responding or calling back. In that situation, then I would say I see no reason not to implement AI voice agents at that point to answer those calls. I mean, they're quite convincing, the voice agents now, you know, and pretty much like perfectly functional in terms of helping someone book an appointment or, you know, get a quote or something like that. So that is, if a business asked me this question, that is what I would advise them firstly. In terms of like using like AI for outbound, as, you know, like AI sales agents doing calls, I'd be a little bit more hesitant with that. I don't know how good the technology is around it. I think it's probably decent, but there I feel like it's a little bit more risky. Whereas if you're basically just capturing leads you would otherwise miss because you would be unavailable, then I think it's fairly logical to implement AI for inbound calls in that sense. And yeah, just like a note on voice modes with AI is that the Codex voice mode is now really, really good, I have to say. Really good. I was using it yesterday. once you work out how to use it as like an orchestrator, it's very, very good, because you can just be essentially on a phone call and say like, okay, start a new thread in this file doing this thing, start a new thread in this file doing this thing. How is that thread going that's doing this thing? So rather than, whereas if you're trying to use Claude like voice mode, which I don't really do, it pretty much keeps you in that one thread. So you can't say, okay, go check on this, go check on that, start that, do that, send a message to that. So yeah, I was using Claude Code Codex, what am I saying? I was using Codex at voice mode, just out and about walking yesterday. I had my AirPods in, and yeah, I was very, very impressed by it, in terms of like an orchestration layer. And I have to give some credit to Alex Finn. His video is what kind of convinced me to try it again, try voice mode again, because I mean I had used it a little bit, and I thought it was fine, but I also thought that it was pretty much just as fast for me to go into each thread individually and just use the dictation tool. But I do think that there is actually some merit to voice mode after watching the Alex Finn video, and I'd recommend watching that video because he goes into some good detail about the sort of terminology and language you need to use to get it to become an effective orchestrator, and why you want it to be an orchestrator rather than the actual executor. But yeah, anyway, a little bit of a tangent there about voice modes, but definitely, yeah, check out the Codex voice mode as like using it on your phone, like through remote connection to your like local laptop or local computer, is very, very cool. Should AIs tell you that they are AIs? I mean, this is a bit of an ethical question. Probably yes. I feel like there was some law in the EU that came into effect quite recently about this, like not just saying whether AIs are AIs, but also if businesses use AI for certain things, they have to disclose that. Yeah, I mean, probably they should. Like, I guess going back to the earlier, I guess there's a question between should they have to state it themselves, versus should they just not be allowed to lie about it. I don't think that AI should be allowed to lie about being AI, but I kind of don't feel that it's absolutely necessary for AI to state that it is AI. As in, if we go back to that like voice AI example, the phone call thing, if you call a company and let's say an AI receptionist picks up because you're calling at, I don't know, 11 p.m, I don't feel that it should have to say, hello, I am an AI voice bot or something like that. You know, why does that really affect if the function of the conversation is to try to, let's say, book an appointment, let's say you're trying to book a dentist appointment, you've called the dentist at 11 p.m, and an AI voice bot answers and says, yeah, we can give you an appointment. I see no real ethical issue with you being unaware that that is not a real human on the other end. Because as long as it's giving you correct information and putting you into the system correctly, there's kind of no, like, you don't call the dentist to book an appointment for the sake of speaking to a human. You book it for the sake of booking a dentist appointment, or you call it for the sake of booking a dentist appointment. So if you achieve that same aim, I feel like there's not too many ethical issues there. If you then said, is this AI, and it said, oh no, this is a real human, then that starts becoming problematic, and I do think that would be an issue. But anyway, I don't normally go into too many of the ethical issues about AI on this like daily thing, but I guess we briefly touched on them there. But yeah, that will wrap it up for today. A few useful points, hopefully. If you did enjoy, please feel free to subscribe. And just to mention again, if you're interested in how I could work with your business to see where you can implement AI effectively, feel free to get in touch through the link in the description below, or if you'd like help through one-on-one coaching, building out your own AI operating system in Claude Code or Codex, also check out the link. And then if you're interested in joining the school community, there's a link for that too. But anyway, that will be it for today. Thanks very much, everyone. I will see you tomorrow.